Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. While away on other cases, these many things were moving parts in the Luigi Mangione case. And one of the more interesting things I found out or have been watching, just as everyone else has, is the attorneys talking about trying to suppress or have a petition the court to have evidence in this case thrown out based on the fact that it was an illegal search. And we're going to get into that because he was arrested in Pennsylvania, in Altoona, Pennsylvania, inside a McDonald's, as we all know the story. And the police were called there as one of the customers recognized him from all of the national and international media. His face was all over the place. And the person reporting it to the police thought that they recognized Luigi Mangione from the person who was wanted in New York for the shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. So that person, of course, called the police. Now, the police respond to the scene and they do what's called a stop, question, and frisk. Became very famous in New York. A stop, question, and frisk based upon reasonable suspicion. And we'll get into the intrusion levels and what happens when a stop, question, and frisk leads to a stop, question, and frisk. The level of suspicion needed to stop someone at that level, the second level of stop, question, and frisk is the first level is mere suspicion. The second level is reasonable suspicion. And the third level is the arrest phase, probable cause. So we'll get into all of that and what the police are allowed to do at the second level of stop, question, and frisk, which is reasonable suspicion. And again, this show is from a police perspective. And we'll put all 2 cents in here because absolutely all the attorneys have put their 2 cents in there and saying they think it should be thrown out because of this, that, and the other thing. Anyway, folks, hold on to your seats, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your cup of coffee. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off the cuff zone, the police off the cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Our second sponsor, Mando, a new product for us. Mando Whole Body Deodorant. And you know, the thing that I like most about Mando Body Deodorant is that it lasts all day and it leaves me feeling clean and fresh. It doesn't quit even under the harshest heat and humidity. The fresh feeling I get keeps me dry and confident. No need to worry about unsightly sweat stains. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% of your starter pack. Use code POLICE in capital letters, POLICE, at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. So, this case of Luigi Mangione, let's get right to it. Let's get to the stop and what the arguments are here. And the argument here is obviously what the police are allowed to do in a stop, question, and frisk situation. And what are they allowed to do? And then when a stop, question, and frisk situation becomes an arrest, the level of the stop gives the police probable cause. There is another level of intrusion that they're allowed to perform, and that's called a search incidental to a lawful arrest. It allows police to search a person or their immediate area without a warrant. That's an important thing. The purpose of this search is to ensure the safety of the police and to prevent the destruction of evidence. When is a search incident to arrest permitted? There must be a lawful arrest. The search must be incident to the arrest. The search must be reasonable. What is considered a reasonable search? A search of the person or the area within their immediate control. A search for weapons or dangerous items. A search for evidence related to the suspected crime. What are the limitations of a search incident to arrest? A search cannot be based on probable cause that might have led to an arrest. A search of bags and other possessions not within the arrestee's immediate reach might not be justified. What if the police find something illegal during a search incident to arrest? The police must take the item and arrest the arrestee for possessing it. So all of these things are from the police perspective of what the police are allowed to do. It would be unreasonable for the police to have reasonable suspicion and to approach someone who is wanted for a murder and known to be armed, that the police are not allowed to stop, question, and frisk. During this stop, question, and frisk, which the Altoona police performed, they recovered a firearm. Now, the reasonable suspicion becomes probable cause. Does the search stop there? No. Now they have what I spoke about earlier, search incidental to lawful arrest. So the entire body of Luigi Mangione will be searched, include all of his property, the backpack that was right within his lungeable area, and all of that evidence that they obtained from that search should be absolutely good. Should be, the courts have ruled that that's a good stop, a reasonable suspicion that led to a probable cause. And now what grounds did the attorneys have to request that the evidence that was recovered in a lawful arrest be thrown out? And it's known as the fruits of the poisonous tree doctrine. But in my humble opinion here, Mr. Luigi Mangione, the arrest is absolutely fine. The arrest was done lawfully, and there was no search warrant necessary in this search. I think that would be absolutely ludicrous to require a search warrant in this case. Let me play this quickly.
Mangione's lawyers want evidence taken from his client's backpack to be tossed out as evidence. He was arrested in Pennsylvania and charged with the December killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The filing says officers illegally stopped Mangione at a McDonald's and searched his backpack without getting a search warrant. Police say they found a gun, notebook manifesto, and written notes inside that backpack.
So absolutely, to reiterate, would be totally ridiculous for, pardon me, folks, totally ridiculous for the police in that situation to obtain a search warrant. So what is the big argument then? The big argument is, at what point is Luigi Mangione in custody? because as I have spoken numerous times on this show, in custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. So once Luigi Mangione is in custody, and for most police, they would say that he's in custody once you put handcuffs on him and he's not free to leave. But lawyers will argue when the police stopped him and they started to question him, that perhaps Miranda should have applied. Was he free to leave? Was he in custody? That is the argument that defense attorneys will be running with. From a police perspective, when they stopped him under reasonable suspicion, was he free to leave? Absolutely not. He was not free to leave. Any police officer that says he was is lying. Was he in custody? No, because had the police officers, their investigation revealed that Luigi Mangione was not the person that they were looking for, he would have been released. So he was not, in fact, in custody. Once they developed probable cause, which occurred during the reasonable suspicion turned into probable cause once they discovered that firearm. And then all other evidence that Luigi Mangione had on him was seizable without a search warrant in regards to search incidental to lawful arrest. So his manifesto, perfectly good. Evidence, the suppressor for the firearm, his clothing, his backpack, all the evidence that he had on his person and in his lungeable area is perfectly good and from a police perspective without a search warrant. Will his attorneys argue that they should have gotten this? That's for them to have stopped what they were doing and to obtain a search warrant during a stop based on reasonable suspicion would be absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, whether it's ridiculous or not, that will be argued inside a courtroom. It's not going to be argued here on this podcast. Anyway, this is Sidebar. Jesse Weber.
Mangione's defense attorney argues his rights were violated. The police conducted an illegal search and seizure out in Pennsylvania. That evidence should be suppressed. Does he have a point? Does he have a valid legal argument? How could this affect Mangione's various criminal cases? We're going to bring on a former Pennsylvania prosecutor to discuss it all. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Luigi Mangione's attorney has just made a big accusation. And if true, if they can prove this, this could potentially really affect his prosecution. And it all stems around when Mangione was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania. We remember how this all went down, right? He was apprehended in a McDonald's after a customer thought he looked a lot like the suspect in the shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, who was gunned down on the streets of New York City just a few days earlier as he was on his way to an investors conference. That customer apparently alerted an employee who then alerted police. And at that point in time, remember, images of the suspected shooter were publicized across the nation. We remember shortly after the killing, the NYPD released surveillance images of a man believed to be the shooter. They released images that were captured inside a Starbucks, person wearing a face mask, obscuring his face. This person was also captured without his mask on, smiling in surveillance from the hostel he was reportedly staying at. There were other images from outside the crime scene, allegedly showing the man carrying a concealed firearm, acting suspiciously. And then you have another image from the suspect that was captured from inside a taxi cab, where he can once again be seen wearing that mask over his face. And when officers detained him, what did they find when they detained him out in Altoona, Pennsylvania? I'm going to read you what it says from Mangione's federal complaint in New York. Quote, members of the Altoona Police Department responded and encountered Mangione, who they also believed matched the appearance of the shooter. When approached by responding officers and asked for identification, Mangione offered the false New Jersey ID used by the shooter to check into the hostel. Mangione was later found to be in possession of a loaded 9mm pistol and silencer consistent with the weapon used to kill the victim. clothing that matched apparel that the shooter wore in the security camera videos, a notebook, several $1,000s in cash, an envelope associated with an FDIC-insured bank with a letter addressed to the feds.
That in itself, now he presented, pardon me for this, he presented a false ID, which was the same ID that he presented to the New York hostel. That information could have been broadcast, or a text message or teletype message, whatever type of message they have nationally, so that every police department in the nation had that. If the Pennsylvania officer that stopped him knew about that identification and he gave it to him as ID right there, that reasonable suspicion in my mind was elevated right to probable cause. But then what happens? They find the firearm. Right away, that reasonable suspicion has just been elevated to probable cause, and we are now in the arrest phase. He is put under arrest. At that point, in custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. But what is an interrogation? Is asking him pedigree information, his name, his address, his date of birth. Is that an interrogation, or is that acceptable? So this is some of the things that the attorney for Luigi Mangione will be asking. When, in fact, was he in custody, and when did Miranda apply? When did his rights apply? And that is an argument that he will put forth to the court.
The notebook contains several handwritten pages that express hostility towards the health insurance industry and wealthy executives in particular. It goes on to say the notebook described how the details are finally coming together. And, quote, I'm glad in a way that I've procrastinated because it allowed me to learn more about the, and then it's an acronym for Company One. And the notebook entry also stated that, quote, the target is insurance because, quote, it checks every box. As far as the Fed's letter recovered from Mangione, it stated, I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. So in the end, Mangione was criminally charged in 3 separate cases after he was extradited back to New York. So in New York State Court, he was indicted on charges of first and second degree murder, possession of a forged instrument, and multiple charges of criminal possession of a weapon. And particularly for the first-degree murder charge, he could face life in prison. Then he was charged with federal crimes in New York, although he's not yet been indicted. We're talking murder through use of a firearm, 2 counts of stalking. The murder charge carries the potential of the death penalty. And out in Pennsylvania, he faces state charges of forgery, carrying a firearm without a license, tampering with identification, possessing instruments of a crime, and providing false identification to law enforcement authorities. So it is Pennsylvania that we want to talk about. Why? Because his Pennsylvania attorney, Thomas Dickey, has argued in a new court filing that any evidence that was seized was obtained illegally and unlawfully, and Mangione's constitutional rights were violated. And in fact, his New York attorney seemingly said the same thing. During a recent hearing, Karen Friedman-Agnifilo argued that Mangione's, quote, constitutional rights were violated, and said, I think there's a very, very serious search issue in this matter, and there might be evidence that is suppressed, meaning it won't come into trial. By the way, our plan is to keep uncovering these Luigi Mangione updates for you as they.
So I think that's what the attorneys are saying is a huge stretch. Do you really think that they're going to suppress this evidence based on a stop, question, and frisk stop, of which they had every right on this earth to perform? And in regards to that stop, question, and frisk, based on reasonable suspicion, it turned into probable cause. No one on the street in this entire nation, in that situation, the facts that we presented in this case, is going to say, oh, let me stop and get a search warrant, and you wait here for 7 hours when I get a search warrant, when the perpetrator was thought to have had a firearm, when the perpetrator was wanted for a murder. So is that reasonable to have the police stop what they're doing and go get a search warrant? No, it's ridiculous. So stopped based on reasonable suspicion. The officers from Altoona got that reasonable suspicion from someone, a civilian in McDonald's. They acted upon it, and it went right up the ladder of suspicion. Reasonable suspicion became probable cause. The search changes after probable cause into search incidental to lawful arrest. However, again, once he is put under arrest, in custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. That's the only thing I agree with the defense upon.
Affected. Now, certainly, if he makes a successful argument in Pennsylvania, obviously he has some reasons for being successful. He has some case law that supports what his position is, but it doesn't automatically suppress those matters in state court in New York or in federal court in New York. So it's kind of a test run in Pennsylvania whether or not he can make a successful argument with regard to suppression.
Let me ask you this. If he has a successful argument, can his New York attorney, Karen Freeman Agnifilo, piggyback that, make the same argument, same filing in New York and be successful there?
Well, yeah, I mean, they could make the same argument, but there would be the possibility that he could be successful in Pennsylvania, but not successful in New York. Now, when you look at these search and seizure issues, you not only look at the federal constitution, you also look at the state constitution.
Right.
And in Pennsylvania, Article 1, Section 8, which deals with issues of search and seizure, is a little tighter than the federal constitution and maybe the New York constitution. So you could be successful in an argument, say, under the Pennsylvania constitution, that this was an illegal search, but not be successful federally or in the state court in New York.
That's a good point. Also, before we get into the details, his attorney filed a writ of habeas corpus where he outlines how Mangioni's rights were allegedly violated. So talk to us about what is this? What is a writ of habeas corpus here? And what is he asking the court to do?
Well, what he's asking, a writ of habeas corpus is an issue, Latin phrase, release the body. You want him released because there was, they're alleging an illegal arrest, that his constitutional rights were violated. Now, in Pennsylvania, what we normally refer to this as an omnibus pretrial motion, which means every issue that could be raised pretrial, you raise it in this motion, and then ultimately you have a hearing in front of a judge. Evidence is presented. Yeah, your legal arguments are presented, and a determination is made under what we call the exclusionary rule, whether or not this evidence should be suppressed because his constitutional rights were violated.
I think this sets the stage perfectly, Matt, and I'm actually going to go piece by piece with this, and we're going to break it down. So I want to get into the filing, and the way it starts off is it goes over the circumstances by which Mangioni was arrested in Altoona.
So we know that Luigi Mangioni was stopped by the Altoona police based on a phone call from someone inside the McDonald's that it appeared that he was one and the same as the person wanted from the shooting in New York City of Brian Thompson, the United Healthcare CEO. The police respond to McDonald's. They do what's called a stop, question, and frisk. At this point, they have what's known as reasonable suspicion, which gives officers a right to pat him down, to ask him questions. And at that point of reasonable suspicion, he is not in custody. Is he free to leave? No. Is that possible to have both? Yes. Attorneys will always try to trick officers on the stand. So let me get this. He was not in custody, but he was not free to leave. Is that possible, officer? Yeah. And the answer is yes, it is. Because once I completed my investigation, if I didn't establish probable cause, he would be free to leave. But until I completed my investigation, he was not free to leave. So, as we know, if he was not free to leave, he was not in custody in that situation, because you could articulate that I was holding him until I completed my investigation. Once my investigation determined that there was no probable cause, then he was free to leave. But what happened during the investigation? The officers established probable cause, and he was placed under arrest. Now he's in custody. Does Miranda apply? Absolutely. You want to interrogate him after that? You must read him Miranda. But as far as the evidence, in my view, and I'm not an attorney, I'm a cop, search incidental to lawful arrest gives the officers to recover all of the evidence, especially that he possessed a firearm. He's under arrest for that firearm. It'd be ludicrous for them, for safety purposes, not to toss him, not to give him a pat down when the person who was wanted was armed with a firearm that was allegedly used to shoot and kill CEO Brian Thompson, right? CEO of United Healthcare. So all of these circumstances give the police probably. So what's the big question now? Is he, does he have the right, to walk away? And does he have the right to say that he was in custody and that his rights were violated? And my position from a police perspective is no, he does not. I think what they were referring to is that, they were questioning him relative to like pedigree information and things like that. It wasn't an actual, they're claiming it was an in custody interrogation. The police, of course, are claiming that no such thing like that occurred. So these are some of the questions that will have to be answered, obviously, by the courts. And these are some of the questions that the defense attorneys, they want to know the answers to. And I don't know if we will have all the answers to that right now. But let me go back quickly to sidebar.
On December 9th, 2024. And this is part of the motion to suppress evidence more specifically. And it explains how Mangione was approached by two uniformed armed officers. They had badges, and how one of the officers positioned himself to Mangione's right, essentially blocking him in, that he couldn't go anywhere. And even at one point suggesting that it was, quote, a human law enforcement wall, when apparently another officer joined him on the side, or as the filing reads, this action taken in order to detain and or totally curtail the liberty of the defendant and to restrict the defendant's path of travel or ingress or egress from the table where he was sitting. These actions were performed to clearly exhibit said officer's authority over defendant. And from there, the filing continues. No explanation was given to the defendant relative to why the police approached him at McDonald's. At most, police indicated that he, quote, looked suspicious and had overstayed his welcome as patron at McDonald's. It is clear that Altoona Police provides a specious and unreasonable reason for approaching defendant. It must be assumed that defendant was being detained for an investigation to which he was not informed.
So, it would be ludicrous for the police to have to hold court inside a McDonald's with a defendant or potential defendant or perpetrator who's armed with a gun. We're not holding court here. We're doing police work, and we're going to do a stop, question, and frisk. And if you're not the bad guy, you're going to be free to leave. If you are, you were placed under arrest, and that's what occurred. So these are some of the issues that we see in this case from a police perspective, and we'll see which way it goes. But certainly, I don't see any of this evidence being thrown out. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff. Have a great day, everyone. God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.